Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another meta breakdown video. In today's video, we're diving deeper into the new Set 21 format that was not only shaken up by a huge ban list, but also a pretty decent set. Not like a crazy overwhelming set or anything, but Set 21 does have some cool strategies and new support cards to offer. So we'll talk about the Tennessee Top Cut Regional in today's video. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to buy or pre-order any of the cards that we talk about in today's video, or any trading cards at all for that matter, it does really help me out if you use my link in the description to TCG Player. I really do appreciate it, guys. Anyways, let's jump right on into this thing, talking about the event itself. So it's the Top Cut Events Tennessee Regional. About 140 players from what I was told, so just short, or maybe a little bit decently short of the full player cap. Not sure what that was. It's typically been, what, 192 as of late, so I'm not sure if that was a total player cap or not. But BO1 pre-side for the main event, then top 16, BO3 single elimination. So for the top 16, right off the rip, we have some insane data. We have 7 green Gohans. So not only is this one of the very few Set 21 decks in this top 16, but this is almost half of the top 16 taken up by a green deck. I don't think we even saw numbers like this when Cell Surge was a deck. Like, that deck was so good and so broken, but not that many people played it. This deck, definitely a lot more like user-friendly and a lot more fun, both for you and the opponent, I would say, because it's not super degen hand rip. But the fact that it's almost 50% of this top cut is absolutely insane. I don't know if it's just like new deck hype, because this was pretty much the deck to talk about out of Set 21, but that combined with the fact that green is finally playable, I wonder if just like so many people in the room played it and that's what led to more conversion. The deck is very good, don't get me wrong. The deck is very good and is totally doable to make top cut, but this many is insane. We'll talk more about that later. We have 2 Pan, 2 Android 21. Pretty expected strategies, you know, Pan being that red deck that we all thought would kind of take the reins that Gogeta and Sid left behind. 21, it was great last format. It probably gets a little bit better this format because aggro is just a little bit lessened, but not by all that much, to be honest. 1 SG Trunks, which got some support in Set 21. 1 Gohan Superhero, which we've been seeing make somewhat consistent numbers. Speaking of somewhat consistent numbers, we also have 1 green Gogeta BR. This is not the first event this deck has ever topped, although I guess maybe it's the first one in Set 21. It did manage to top 1 or 2 events in Set 20 as well. 1 Trunks Gogeta, which we've been seeing since the beginning of the dawn of history of time. And then we have 1 Frieza Swap, which I told you guys, this deck is legit. We'll talk more about that in a bit as well. But firstly, let's go to Gohan. What does Gohan have going for it? Well, honestly, quite a few things. I mean, besides a super powerful Z leader, you've got Goku Gohan Father-Son Solidarity, which pretty much needs to be negated by your opponent, because if they don't negate this, it's going to be so hard for them to out combo it, coupled with the fact that it's probably critting them from 3 to 2 life and then going in for that massive double strike, protected by barrier for the turn it's played. They have to negate it, coupled with the fact that they probably also have to negate the leader swing itself if the Gohan player is on 4 or more energy, because the Goku Peace Resolution SCR is a triple strike out of nowhere from the leader. So you have 2 attacks per turn, you know, turn 4 and beyond, that need to be negated. And in the case of the 8 drop, when you negate it, you're still losing card command, you're still losing board presence. So that demands a lot from the opponent. That can be very hard for certain decks to actually do, is negate all those different things every single turn. Although some decks can do it, like I think blue and yellow decks can do it somewhat effectively, but your red, black, and even other green decks are probably going to have a bit of a hard time actually accomplishing that. Then there's Uneasing Awakened Rage. Going from last format and even several formats before, floodgates like Uneasing Awakened Rage were completely common. However, they were battle cards, so it's pretty much vital for all these decks to have these counterplays that stop floodgates that have similar effects to Uneasing Awakened Rage. However, Uneasing Awakened Rage is an extra card, so your opponent really can't do anything to stop it. Like, there are some things that can interact with it if your opponent activates Uneasing Awakened Rage for free, but outside those fringe cases, or the case of like a full-on Swift Retaliation Cooler or Baby Golden Avenger, this card's resolving against your red decks, it's resolving against your black decks, and yeah, yellow and blue had to be having the perfect setup in order to stop this card. So you have a super consistent floodgate that, yes, even though people don't like the fact that it charges your opponent's Z energy, it still taxes their hand and your opponent can't stop it. That's honestly worth the super minor downside of charging your opponent's Z energy. It really doesn't matter. So yeah, this deck is really good. Did I ever expect it to take this much of a top cut? No, I really didn't. So this is super surprising. It did win the Australian regional as well. That was super surprising. That was definitely a smaller tournament, But yeah, I'm gonna be definitely keeping an eye on whether or not Gohan continues to put up these numbers. I kind of expect it to settle down where it'll be like a deck we do see, like, you know, 2, 3, maybe 4 slots in the top cut, but 7 to 8, man, that is a lot. So that's a high percentage of top cut. But yeah, this deck also went on to win the event, needless to say, and yeah, this deck is making a strong showing right out the gates of set 21. All right, then we have Pan. Once again, this is the deck that everyone expected to pretty much take the throne of Sin and Gogeta. And Pan also has a lot of great stuff going for it. This deck draws a whole lot of cards, albeit it has to work a little bit harder to do so than Sin or Gogeta. But the thing about Pan, it's just red good stuff deck. It's way less reliant on an archetype. Don't get me wrong, there are archetypal cards for this deck, but you've got SS Broly Surging Attack, you've got Gohan defeating the Demon, just incredible cards you can slot into Pan, and you don't have to sacrifice any of what your main deck requires in terms of engine, because the engine's so small already. And then of course you have the ability to buff SS4 Goku Defender of Life to astronomical numbers. By the end of the whole effect chain, it ends up being like a 40k dual attack double striker that burn your opponent for 1. Oh, don't forget the barrier as well, making it really hard for your opponent to actually deal with the thing if they have any battle tricks. So 2 Pan here definitely sounds like a good representative. Now, I don't know, my opinion, I call SS2 Gohan, going back to the green deck for a second, I call that an aggro deck. Even though it does have elements of hand rip, it does hit very hard, very fast, even starting from turn 3. So I kind of call it an aggro deck, and at least in my experience with Gohan, you don't want to go super, super late against some of these decks. And that's just, I only say that because Pan, of course, is another aggro deck. So we're going to kind of tally up how many of these decks were aggressive, how many were mid-rangey, and how many were control strategies. I will say, in terms of Gohan and Pan, they can adopt a mid-range strategy somewhat well. Pan playing like Topo, where you floodgate your opponent and you draw a card back so you don't even lose out on hand size. That can definitely allow Pan to go a bit more mid-range, but I wouldn't say Pan wants to go super late with the likes of like Android 21 or some yellow decks. So far I would say 2-ish aggro decks in our top 16. Then we have Android 21. So I think it's by no surprise, this is the kind of standard benchmark control deck of the format. It was very good last format, but what keeps this deck in check is aggro itself, because on turn 2, when you do tap out for Android 21 in the name of peace, you're very, very vulnerable to being aggro down. Like, the leader takes life to gain advantage on the unawakened side, you play it for life while you're on your awakened side, and then you're tapping out to ramp. And you have tricks to get untapped, don't get me wrong. You got Zeno super combo, you've got different Android super combos that can untap you, possibly sparking D magic once you're awakened. So you can do things like that, but if you go second against an aggro deck, you got to really think twice about tapping out for that ramp. Although, if you get to like the, 5-6 energy part of the game relatively healthy, you're taking over the game no matter what. And honestly, a huge factor of that is Android 21 Transcendental Predator. I mean, we all have the frustrating experience of what this card does by now. Wipes the entire board, including unisons, gets your opponent life back, and is playable for 2 energy, if not less, when you're up against a blue or green deck with this specific leader. And it's highly searchable with this strategy. So yeah, I think as long as this card is legal for play, blue-green is going to be all right. But yeah, 21 players and control players, you do have to be navigating your way around the aggro deck, of which there are no shortage of in this format. There are a lot of aggro strategies in this particular format. All right, next up we have Gohan Superhero. Once again, another aggro deck. Now this is interesting because I think in this slot, it could have very easily been the new Blue Baby archetype from set 21. That's another one that a lot of people have their eyes on. However, Gohan is putting up somewhat consistent numbers. It's not taking like 2 to 3 to 4 slots of any top cuts, but it is like making its name known here and there. One top here, one top there, and it's continuing to do so in a set 21 format. This deck also has a lot of really great tools at its disposal. Goku and Oob Newfound Journey was a great recent addition for this strategy, and one of the coolest synergies with the deck is SS3 Tag Team Trunks, which is searchable off Goku and Oob Newfound Journey. It also allows you to go for really big double strike crits and get cards out of your hand that you normally weren't able to combo off, like extra cards, for example. And then your leader can refuel and draw 3 fresh cards if you're able to dump your whole hand on the SS3 Tag Team Trunks attack. So another deck that you definitely don't want to sleep on. I do think there are a lot of ways in which you can take advantage of Gohan only having 3 cards in hand defensively, but still one that you want to be very wary of, especially if you lose a dice roll and they have the or they put you on the back foot rather with less energy. So yeah, very interesting. We'll see if this one continues to top, but check the tallies. We have another aggro deck here in this top 16. Next up, we have SSG Trunks, which received some incredible support from set 21 Wild Resurgence. That support really allows you to play your Unison much more consistently, which the deck really does rely on, and that's made even more evident by the Z Leader having a Spirit Boost ability. So yeah, this deck just got a whole lot of good stuff in set 21. This one, I mean, it's hard to classify any black deck as mid-range because black just doesn't have the same defensive tools that these blue and yellow decks that want to play in mid-range often have. But this deck does have its own Floodgate, even though it may not be the best in terms of the pan counter attack. It does have blockers that come from the warp, though. It does have combo power from the warp if you choose to play certain tech cards. So I don't know. This is another one that I'll kind of classify as like aggro slash maybe mid-range, but it's still going to be on the more aggressive side for sure. Then we have Gogeta BR. I honestly don't know how to classify this deck in any regard. It's actually kind of interesting in that it's almost like SS2 Gohan, probably just a good bit worse, because when you look at SSB Gogeta Limits Broken, the first auto, when this card's played, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, KO it, and your opponent discards one card from their hand. Pretty much identical to the 8-drop. It only costs 1 energy to play this card, as opposed to the 2 energy it costs to play Goku Gohan Solidarity, but you typically have to play a 6-drop beforehand, which will cost you at least 1 or 2 energy to get this thing out on the board. However, we did get Gogeta Birth of the Ultimate Warrior from the most recent championship pack, which probably is pretty good for this deck. So you play it for 1 via its own Union Fusion. Auto limit 1 if it's your turn. When you combo, draw 1 card, and this card can't be KO'd till the end of your opponent's turn, which that kind of protection, not great. However, if Green Gohan is gonna consist of this much of the top cut and of the meta in general, having that protection is actually going to be very, very good from a meta perspective. Then activate limit 1 for green. If you have 4 more energy, add this card to your Z energy. Play 1 green Gogeta BR, the energy cost of 8 from your Z energy. That card gains dual attack for the turn. So you are bringing out Limits Broken for 2 energy total. There is a stipulation of having to wait until you have 4 or more energy, which technically Goku Gohan Solidarity does not have. But a lot of times you are waiting till turn 4 anyway, because that's when you're Z Awaken. Then you can use the Z Awaken Leader's ability to combo the 10k Goku, which will then burn your opponent a life. So there's that. This card, though, does give the Gogeta dual attack. So you're swinging for 35, double strike dual attack, and in that first swing, you're proccing the auto of popping a guy and making them pitch a card. So it is very comparable. And while this deck has the protection of not being able to be KO'd on their boss monsters, that's going to be a real big problem for other green decks. So this actually might be a pretty cool anti-meta pick if Gohan continues to reign supreme. Then we have Frieza Swap. This is a really cool deck, guys. I honestly didn't expect it to top too much, and hey, it's only 1 slot out of, however many tournaments set 21 will have. But this deck does have really cool things going for it. It's very, very consistent thanks to the return of Army of Terror, searching whatever Frieza you need for the most part. And then Frieza Waiting to See is a really cool card because it offers you effect negation, just like every other yellow deck is playing Sin, Shenron, Cold Hearted Shadow Dragon to find. This deck has it built into the archetype. However, it's a little bit different. This Frieza has to activate on the first card your opponent plays. As we're Sin, you can choose when to activate it. So it's definitely different and a little bit worse in that regard, but still a card you can play for so cheap in this deck. It is really good. This deck can also be very aggressive out of nowhere. Once you get to your Z leader, you basically turn most of your swap costs into 0 costs. So if you get into a 1 cost, you can get up into a 5 cost for free after that, I believe. So that can be very, very aggressive and powerful for sure. So this deck definitely has stuff going for it. Besides the fact it can play like Cold Bloodlust, that's really great against a lot of SCRs in this current format. So it's got some stuff going for it for sure. And then finally, we have Trunks Gogeta. I mean, I've talked about this deck to death over the last, like, what, year and a half. So I don't feel like there's much more to say about it. Unfortunately, I don't have the deck list for this event yet. Maybe they're going live today. If they are, I will drop them down in the pinned comment. So make sure to look out for that. But overall, guys, very cool stuff. We have a very aggressive format on our hands, which makes sense for the beginning of a new meta because aggro decks just tend to do well and take advantage of the non-established control of mid-range decks at this point in the game. But there's a lot of really good aggro decks out there, so make sure if you're playing mid-range or control, you have a plan to deal with those decks. Overall, guys, I want to know in the comments below what you think about this format. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.